If you're a runner and you're putting in the miles, but you're not getting fitter, then this video is for you. Because chances are, it's not your training plan that's failing you. It's how you're using carbohydrate. Now, I'm a registered sport nutritionist on the SENR registry board, and I've helped hundreds of runners. And the problem was never not enough carbs or too many carbs. It was really the timing, type, and digestion speed. I see this time and time again. Maybe you increase your volume, you start ticking off those sessions, but actually your runs feel flat. You know that your recovery sucks, and some days you eat and you feel too bloated, and other days you feel completely depleted. Because most runners eat well on paper, yet within weeks they're feeling more fatigued, craving sugar, and wondering why their fitness isn't sticking until we fix this. Like for example, Claire, who was a client of mine who was nervous about incorporating more carbs into her diet, particularly the high sugar ones around her training. But after implementing what I'm about to show you, she was able to start pushing harder in her runs and feeling better because of it.
So all my sessions have just been cracking. Everything's been great. Really, really, really good. I've there was a Saturday afternoon I was as flat as a pancake, and I know that was probably down to eating. But no, there's definitely more carbs coming into my diet. There's no doubt about that. And I do think it's beneficial.
So by the end of this video, you will understand exactly how different carbs are digested, when they help adaptation, and when they hinder it, so that you're never wild guessing with your nutrition again. Oh, and by the way, this isn't advice that you'll find on an Instagram infographic or by logging on MyFitnessPal. Let me explain. So I'll just put my whiteboard there to help me explain a few things. But first, I want to make clear that carbs are not good or bad. They're fast or slow based on their structure. And that structure is going to impact the speed at which our body digests them. And it's this speed of digestion that informs when we should have them so that they help instead of hurt us. And when you understand the different carbohydrate structures, everything else starts to make sense. So we have simple sugars. We have monosaccharides and we have disaccharides. Monosaccharides have one bond between them. These are sugars. Sugars, they're fast releasing. Then we have starches. So these are the ones in potatoes, in bread, in whole grains. These also are made up of sugars. However, they're long chain molecules. We then have fibers. These are also long chain molecules. However, with fibers, they're connected with bonds that our body can't break down. Now, in essence, our body is trying to break everything down to the most simple form. So it kind of makes sense that these ones are not going to take very long because there's only a little bond to break. Whereas starches, it's going to take a lot longer. It will start snipping them up into shorter ones and then shorter still. With fibers, our body simply doesn't have the digestive enzymes to break these down. So fibers pass through us and are what form the bulk in our stool. This is why we only get 1 calorie per 1 gram of fiber, whereas we get 4 calories per 1 gram of carbohydrate. So let's say we have a teaspoon of sugar. We put it straight into our mouth. Now that is what's called sucrose, which is a disaccharide. It's glucose and fructose together. Now we've got digestive enzymes in our mouth that are going to be able to start breaking this bond down, making it feel really sweet so that we taste all of that sugar. So it's already going to be starting to be digested in here. However, we'll then swallow that and it will be starting to continue to break down. So it's basically already in its small form here. So that as soon as it comes through the stomach and enters the small intestine here, it's going to be released into our body. Because there's no real digestion being taken place, that takes time, it's coming in quickly. It gets into our system fast. So let's take white bread as an example. Now this is made of a starch, but it's still going to be broken down really quickly. So that's why if you chew white bread for a bit, you start realizing actually it tastes really sweet. That's because the enzymes in your mouth, the amylase, is starting to snip it up and chop it down into smaller carbohydrate structures. Then it's going to come down, not spend very long in the stomach, and because it's already now quite small, it's going to be getting into our system fairly rapidly as it meets more enzymes here that are going to really start breaking it down into these sugars quickly. So that's why it's termed fast releasing or high glycemic index. But don't worry all about that. All you really need to know is that the more fiber a carbohydrate is packaged with, so the more whole food it is. So if we had whole grains, for example, let's say we had a real granary loaf, because there's more fiber packaged with the starch, it's going to take longer here. And then because there's more fiber, our body's taking a bit of extra time for it to break down. Therefore, the release of sugar coming through our gut into our system is going to be slower. Now, what this causes is a graph. So let me come here, try and change the focus. So if we have sugar, this is time here, and this is our blood glucose. So this is sugar coming into our system. So if we eat that teaspoon of sugar here, it's not going to take very long. That sugar is going to come into our system quickly. If we then have the white bread, it's going to take a little bit longer, but it's then still going to be coming into our system pretty quickly. The more fiber we eat, the slower it's going to come in. It won't be quite as high, but it'll be a little bit longer lasting. That's why the speed and the structure have importance. But if we know this, then we know how to utilize it to our advantage, and we can start to use some sport nutrition best practices. So how does all of this tie together and help you start performing again and getting fitter as a runner? Well, we need to appreciate that actually the difference in digestion speed, some being fast, some being slow, is great. We can use that to our advantage to help us fuel and refuel from your sessions. And when you get this right, you start, one, performing better in your sessions, but also having more consistent energy through the rest of the day. So this is where we need to be strategic with when we use the higher sugar, the faster releasing, and the slower releasing starches with much more fiber. Let's imagine then that you are having a rest day. You're not doing any training on this day. What do we want to be doing? Well, we want to be having lots of these slow releases because we don't want to have quick energy ups and downs. We don't really have the necessity for lots of sugar and lots of sweet food coming in. So on the rest day, we want to prioritize the carbohydrates that you're eating to be primarily from whole food, because that whole food is packaged with much more fiber. You can simplify this advice and think, right, is the carbohydrate element in the meal, is it a brown version or a whole grain version? The reason we want those is because there's more fiber in that part of the grain, so it's going to slow that release instead of having the white options of the carbohydrates. That's what we want outside of that training window. So if we're not immediately before, during, or in the hour after, I want to prioritize your meals to have lots of this slow release. That's going to be getting some carbohydrate in, but it's going to give you more mellow energy. Then we want to really start utilizing sport nutrition. So if we want, let's say we've trained here, you've gone for a run. This is me running. Now, because you're running, your heart rate's elevated, your body is going to be using your muscle glycogen stores, which is carbohydrate stores. Your store of carbohydrates is fairly limited. So after an hour and a half run, if you haven't eaten that much, or even if you have eaten a couple of gels during that run, you've still depleted a lot of your petrol tank. So what we need to do is we need to get carbs back in and get them back in quickly. Okay, if we want to get them back in quickly, we want to utilize some faster releasing carbs. The good news here is that the faster releasing the carbs, the quicker it comes in. Panic, the more insulin our body releases, but insulin is our storage hormone for that. So if we have a big rise in insulin after our blood glucose spikes, that's just another signal to channel this carbohydrate, this simple sugar that we've eaten, back into our muscles. So it's having a helpful effect there. Utilizing some of the simple stuff, what's some practical strategies of that? This is the easy to digest carbs. This is where we actually go for the white varieties, the things less high in fiber. So white bread with a bit of jam on it. Kids cereal, instead of having a big bowl of oats, we could have some granola because it's got the oats, but it's also got some sugar to make it into granola. We could have some Rice Krispies instead of having some muesli, for example. A fantastic refuel idea is smoothies. Now, for general day-to-day life, and smoothies often get marketed as a health food that everyday people should have at work, at the desk, and it's a really healthy, nutritious thing. Well, realistically, it's a great way to get in a lot of fast-releasing sugar. So if you're drinking it at rest, it's not really ideal. It can potentially be hindering us, creating a little bit of inflammation, all the rest of it. When we want to have it is immediately after, because it's going to give a load of fast releasing sugar when our body needs it. And also because it's made of fruit, it's going to be super nutrient dense. So it's going to be a good thing there. If you're currently thinking, but James, I do have smoothies and I don't necessarily always have them afterwards, then the tip I would suggest is to add some extra fiber or a bit of extra fat to it. So if you're having a more green-based smoothie, could you put a quarter of an avocado in there? If you're having a banana or fruit smoothie, could you put a bit of peanut butter in it? Because the fat is going to have a similar effect on fiber on the speed of digestion of the carbohydrate. It's going to slow the release as it comes through the system, because it's going to make sure that your smoothie, if there's peanut butter in it, it's going to come through the stomach slower. So therefore the carbs are going to drip feed in and have a more mellow response. So hour after, let's go sweet. We want to have something fast releasing sugar wise. If we're not in that hour after, we transition and we have more high fiber foods, really focusing on adding vegetables to your meal. Veg, super healthy, very high in fiber. They're going to mellow the release of the starches coming in. Well, what about before and during my run, James? What type of carb do we want then? Well, we also want fast releasing, because when you're running, your body is putting a lot of the blood flow in your muscles to actually power you to keep running. Now your gut here, this requires blood flow to do all the digestion. So if we're eating lots of high fiber carbohydrates here, it's requiring more blood in here. The blood isn't in there because you're going for a run. You're saying, hey, I need to try and hold this time. So now there's undigested food here, and that's why we feel a bit in our stomach if we've had a big meal, lots of healthy carbohydrate right beforehand. Whereas if you were to have a slice of toast and jam and go out for a run, it doesn't require as much digestion, so you'll feel okay. So we could actually utilize some of the higher sugar, faster releasing carbs immediately before your session. So that'll be in the 10-15 minutes before, like right close before. Or having more of the high sugar foods coming in during. And this is why sports supplements like gels are basically sugar delivery systems. You're just looking for ways of getting in sugar while you're running, because we don't want to be messing about making digestion any harder than it needs to be. This is, there's a slight caveat here, if you're doing more ultra endurance, maybe you're doing a 24-hour run or something crazy like that, 10 hours, well then you might not want to just be having sugar for that amount of time. So actually having something which is a little bit more complex might be more palatable. But also, if you're going for that long, the intensity is going to be down. So there's not going to be as much blood in your muscles, so there's going to be a bit more in your gut, making it easier to digest and tolerate. The final point I want to make, and you've probably experienced this, you've just finished a hard run, and in that half an hour, hour after, you've probably heard the advice, oh, you must eat straight after your session, but actually you don't really feel like it. Well, firstly, why is that? Well, exercise suppresses one of our hormones called ghrelin, which is our acute appetite hormone. So actually we're just not feeling very hungry in that moment. There's a second reason too, that when you're going for that hard run, your body is in your sympathetic go nervous system. And it's going to take a little bit of time to unwind from that fight or flight system towards our rest and digest system. It doesn't happen immediately. Therefore, our body's not primed to digest. It's not primed for food. We're not in that right system. However, we've got this best practice sport nutrition window of eating in the hour after. And I really want to encourage you to hit this, because if you do, and then you're training again the following day, you will train better. There's literally scientific papers showing that. But facing a big healthy bowl of slow releasing carbohydrate is going to be probably the last thing that you want, because you're not primed for digestion here. This is another reason why having something that's potentially hyper palatable, so maybe even some ultra processed food, something that doesn't require that much chewing, you can eat even though you're not necessarily really hungry for it, it's going to enable you to get it in. Similarly, another reason why smoothies are so good here is because they don't require loads of chewing. You can actually just drink it down. You can get in a very large amount of carbohydrate there without feeling overly full and bloated. Then once you've hit this big tick, once you've hit that sport nutrition best practice, you can unwind. Then 2-3 hours after, you have a meal containing more of this slow releasing stuff, and we pivot back because we know that diets rich in fiber, lower glycemic index carbohydrates are better for health and longevity. So we want to get the best of both worlds here. We want to use carbs, enjoy the sugar, but have them either immediately before, during, or in this hour after. Then we transition into lots of whole food and slow releasing carbs. If you can get this right, you will feel so much better. You will start to actually adapt to all the training that you're doing. Fitness is going to start to stick as well. You're probably going to have a few longevity benefits as well. So if you've enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe, share it with a friend that needs to hear it, and drop me any questions in the comments.